Hi, I'm Maya, and today I want to talk about Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This book is about a princess named Shiori who has six brothers, a dad, and a stepmom. She finds out that her stepmom is a sorceress, and her stepmom curses her and her brothers. She turns the princes into cranes, and she makes it so that if Shiori speaks or makes any kind of noise, her brothers will die. So Shiori is on a quest to save her brothers. Along the way, she encounters a dragon named Saryu who can shapeshift into a human form. And he's a big help to her, as is the magic paper bird named Kiki that Shiori brought to life. Shiori journeys all across the kingdom, and the whole time she has this bowl stuck on her head that her stepmom cursed her with, so that no one can tell who she really is. She spends time as a servant in different areas of the kingdom. The story is very Odyssey-like, and it's based on the Grimm's fairy tale, The Six Swans. So before I talk more about the story, I want to talk about the book itself and how pretty it is. I love the cover, and I also love how it looks without the dust jacket. I don't know if you can see, but there's a crane engraved into the cover. And there's a really cool map. I love when books have maps because it really helps immerse myself in the world. Another pretty thing is that there are these cool feathers at the beginnings of all the chapters. I really love the Asian-inspired aesthetic of this book. I love the descriptions of the architecture and the clothes, and I especially love the descriptions of the food. Describing food is something that Shannon Hale and Leigh Bardugo are both really good at doing, and I love reading about food in these fantasy worlds. It just helps the worlds feel even more real to me. So the ending of this book definitely sets up for a sequel. I think it could have been a standalone if some loose ends were tied up, but I am excited to see where the series goes. So I want to talk about the relationships between Shiori and her brothers and her father. There's a part about the meaning of Shiori's name that I wanted to read. If anyone was a seer, perhaps it had been Mama, for naming me Shiori, meaning not, a symbol that I was the last of her 7 children, the one who would bring my brothers together, no matter how fate conspired to pull us apart. So that's not K-N-O-T. And that is something that you see throughout the book, is that Shiori is what keeps them all tied together. There's another part where she's talking about constellations and how her father named a constellation after them. I searched the heavens for stars I recognized. There weren't many: the rabbit, the moon lady, the hunter's bow and arrow, and the crane, the sacred messenger of fate. The crane was a constellation of 7 stars northeast of the moon. I traced it with my finger, the way I did when I was a child. Father had named those 7 stars after us 7 children. I think that's really important and really beautiful because it shows how precious these children are to the father. Later in the book, there is a connection between knots and cranes and fate and soulmates. To this day, cranes carry the strands of our fate. They say that each time 2 people's paths cross, so do their strands. When they become important to one another or make a promise to one another, a knot is tied, connecting them. But when they fall in love, their strands are tied together at both ends, becoming one, and their fates are irrevocably joined. And then Shiori thinks, if fate is a bunch of strings, then I'll carry scissors. My choices are my own. I'll make them as I please. So Shiori is constantly battling against fate and trying to pave her own way, but fate keeps catching up to her. And so this battle between fate and choice is something that goes on throughout the whole book. So if you like fairy tales, if you like action and adventure and romance and family relationships, you should definitely give this book a read. That's really all I can say without spoilers, so now I'm going to talk about spoilers. So first I want to talk about the love story. Shiori's love interest is named Taken, and he is a lord of the 3rd rank, and I think it's so funny that Shiori uses that title as an insult and thinks of him as beneath her, and that he's just a backwards barbarian, when that couldn't be farther from what he is. He's refined, and he's cultured, and he sings, and he's a good storyteller, which is something that Shiori really admires. So Shiori and Taken have been betrothed since they were little, and Shiori has always resented him, even though she never officially met him. Later we learn that Taken had sent a bunch of letters to Shiori over the years, telling her stories, telling her about himself, hoping to build a relationship, and she just ignored them. And she ends up feeling really bad about that because she realizes that she actually loves Taken. Tolkien has so many moments where he is just so romantic. His speeches and his letters are just full of swoony sentences. He's very poetic and very charming. So another thing I wanted to talk about was Shiori's magic. I think it's so cool that she has powers, and I love that she can give some of her life force to other things, and how she brings the flowers back to life and stuff like that. I think she has a very beautiful power. So there were a lot of interesting characters in this book. One of my favorites was the chef who worked for Tolkien and his family. I loved how kind he was to Shiori and how he welcomed her into the kitchen and was compassionate towards her when everyone else was being mean to her. And I don't know if we ever find out what happened to the chef, so I'm hoping that we learn more about him in the next book because I really liked him. I hope he's doing well. One of the worst characters, obviously, is Zirina. She's just a total brat who bullies Shiori at Tolkien's home. So obviously she's already a character that we strongly dislike, but then she gets even worse. And that moment is so creepy when she transforms into Gaia, Shiori's maid from back home. I was not expecting that. And it's so creepy, the description, how Zirina's young face suddenly melts into Gaia's old face. The mouth gets wider and the skin droops. It's very creepy. I think she was a good villain. So one character that really annoyed me was Tolkien's mother. She was so stubborn. She trusted people that she shouldn't have trusted, and she distrusted people that she should have trusted. She was really frustrating, especially how she treated Shiori. So the MVP was Kiki, for sure, the magic paper bird. Shiori and her brothers would definitely be dead without Kiki, and they wouldn't have a plan without her at all. She was their go-between. She was the one that transmitted messages. She was the warning bell on several occasions. She helped gather crucial information. She's just the best. So the big twist at the end is that the stepmother is actually a good guy. And the reason she cursed her stepchildren was to protect them from the wolf, who wanted to use Shiori's magic blood to release the demons that had been trapped in the mountain. And so I understand why the stepmother did what she did, but I also feel like she could have done it better. I think she could have explained herself more. Surely there was an easier way. Did she really have to be so mean and cruel to Shiori just to push her away and keep her from discovering her magic? Couldn't she have told her new family about her past? I think they would have understood. I understand that it was scary because magic was forbidden, but I think she should have realized that her husband and her stepchildren loved her enough to see past that. She was also seriously sinister when Shiori first discovered her using magic. She was so creepy with the snakes and everything. I mean, I think most people would assume that she was bad. But the stepmother was a very interesting character, and I want to talk about her more later. But for now, I want to talk about the love triangle that I think is getting set up. Sarayu, the dragon that can shapeshift into human form, was acting pretty jealous of Tolkien and how much Shiori liked Tolkien. So I think a love triangle is brewing, and I think that could be really fun. So like I said earlier, this book is based on the Grimm's fairy tale, The Six Swans, and I read a summary of The Six Swans, and I just wanted to compare the original to the retelling. So the overall premise is the same. The 7 children of a king are cursed by their stepmother. In the fairy tale and in the book, the brothers have a little bit of time in the evening where they can turn back into their human form. Another similarity is that the princess has to gather nettles and sew something to save her brothers. In the original fairy tale, she has to sew some shirts that she then puts on her brothers to help them change back into human form permanently. In this book, she's gathering the nettles and sewing a net that will be used to capture the stepmother and take the dragon pearl that is in the stepmother's heart, which is the source of her power. In the original fairy tale, Shiori marries the equivalent of Tolkien and they have children, but that doesn't happen in this book. But something that does happen in both the original and in the retelling is that Shiori, or the princess, is sentenced to burn at the stake for using magic. And in both versions of the story, in the end, the curse is broken. In the Grimm's fairy tale, the youngest brother, who in this book is called Hasho and is Shiori's favorite brother, gets a shirt that is missing a sleeve, so he turns back into a human except for one arm that stays a wing. That doesn't happen in this book, and I'm really glad. He does injure his arm, which I think is a nice nod to the original, but I'm glad in the end that Hasho has both of his human arms. I think it would be so weird to just have a wing for the rest of your life. I feel like that would be very inconvenient. And of course, the biggest difference between the Grimm's fairy tale and Elizabeth Lim's retelling is that the stepmother is not the villain. And I think it's really cool that Elizabeth Lim turned the trope of the evil stepmother on its head. I'm glad that the stepmother was actually a good person who loved her husband and her stepchildren. And I'm glad we learned more about her tragic backstory and how she had a sister who died and how she missed her home. And I love how protective she is of her new family. The scene where the stepmother is dying because the dragon pearl has been taken from her and she's saying goodbye to Shiori is so sweet and tender. I really loved that part. So there are a lot of themes and motifs and symbolism in this book, and obviously Shiori's relationships with her brothers and her father and Taken are all very important, but I think the most important relationship in this book, and the relationship that is really at the heart of the story and the driving force behind the story, is the relationship between Shiori and her stepmother. So I really enjoyed this book and I can't wait for the sequel. Thank you so much for watching.